Greetings, everyone. Good evening. My name is James Albus, and I am a Senior Advisor to the Commissioner at the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection. Really excited for everyone to be joining us tonight for the meeting of the Equity and Environmental Justice Working Group of the Governor's Council on Climate Change. Appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule. I know everybody is very busy despite the current conditions, and appreciate you being flexible and joining remotely. I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started with the meat of the meeting. First of all, this meeting is being recorded, so if you have to leave early for whatever reason, or you know folks who were not able to join tonight but would like to watch, we will be posting the meeting on the GC3 website a few days from now. Additionally, we have closed captioning available. So for folks who would like to turn that on, there is a button at the bottom of your screen next to share screen. If you move your mouse down there, I will also note that in the chat. And I'd appreciate it if everybody could keep on mute while the meeting is going on and our presenters are speaking. And we will have opportunity for discussion later on. At that point, I'd ask that folks who wish to speak use the raise your hand function, which is in the participant tab. So again, if you scroll down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button for participants. If you click on that, you'll see at the bottom a number of options, including raise your hand. That's how I will know to call on you and unmute your microphone so you could speak and ask a question or make a comment when the time comes. So again, thanks for joining. With that, I will turn it over to the Equity and Environmental Working Group co-chairs, Marian Engelman-Lotto and Lee Cruz.
Good evening and welcome everyone. We do have a very tight agenda this evening, so by example, I'm going to show you how we're going to introduce ourselves. My name is Lee Cruz. I am the Director of Community Outreach at the Community Foundation for Greater New Haven and a resident of New Haven. I'd like to turn it over to Marian for introduction.
Thank you. My name is Marian Engelman-Lotto, and I direct a environmental justice clinic at law school and also at the Yale School of Public Health and the Yale School of Forestry. I'm going to add one element to these introductions and then we'll go through the list. I wish we could ask everybody on the line to introduce themselves, but at this point we're going to ask the members of the Equity and Environmental Justice Working Group to introduce themselves so we can see who's on the working group. There will be, if we do this efficiently, time at the end of the meeting for public comments as well. But the one element we ask each of the working group members to offer is your name and affiliation, if any, and then we have laid out 4 working groups, subcommittees, that we are hoping that you will identify which one you'd like, one or more you'd like to participate in. And then after this meeting, we will get back in touch with each of these subcommittees and organize an initial meeting. And the 4 are adaptation, mitigation, public participation, and a subcommittee on developing mapping tools that will help map vulnerability. You should have all received an email about this. So I ask if you can introduce yourselves briefly, to say your name, your affiliation, and which subcommittees you are interested in working on. So with that, maybe I'll pass this to Alex Rodriguez to model brevity in introductions.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you for hosting. My name is Alex Rodriguez. I'm with the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, and the subcommittees that I'd like to join are mitigation and public participation.
Thank you. Brenda? Brenda Greer?
Watson, Executive Director of Operation Fuel. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Progress on Mitigation Strategies.
Thank you. Do we have, in addition, do we have Brenda Greer on the phone?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's all right. That's fine. That was not clear. Okay. Emily Basham. And if I mess up someone's name, I apologize. Emily?
This is Emily. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, you got my last name correct. This is Emily Basham, Manager of Partnership Development at the Connecticut Green Bank. I'd like to participate in the mitigation subcommittee and the mapping tool subcommittee.
Thank you. John Humphreys?
Hi, this is John Humphreys. I'm with the Connecticut Roundtable on Climate and Jobs, and I'm also serving as a co-chair of the Mitigation Strategies Working Group, and so I think that it makes sense for me to be on that subcommittee here too.
Thanks. Is Julie Jones here? Kathleen Donovan? Leticia Colon de Mejias? Lynn Bonnet? Michael Piscatelli? Orlando Velasco? Orlando?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, my name is Orlando Velasco. I am the Director of Health Equity at the Department of Public Health. I live in Hartford, Connecticut, and yeah, we're gonna leave it like that for now, but I am interested in that mapping tool.
Mapping tool, thank you. Stanley Lord? Sina Wazer?
Hi, my name is Sana Wazer. I'm with Sunrise, Connecticut, and I'm also a student at UConn. And I would be interested in joining the mitigation and public participation subcommittees.
Great. Is Sharon Lewis on? Subhada Kambli? Stephanie Clark?
Good evening. Stephanie Clark. I'm a program officer at the Community Foundation of Eastern Connecticut, and I'm most interested in public participation.
Thanks. Tyra Penn? I thought I saw your name pop.
Yep, I'm here. I'm here. I just had to unmute. Yeah, my name is Tyra Penn. I'm the Director of Planning and Development for the town of Thompson, and I'm interested in the adaptation subgroup.
Wonderful. Thank you. Steve Schrag? I thought Steve had introduced himself. Deborah Thomas Sims? Maisa Tisdale? Kathy Cushman? Marisa Rivera?
Hi, my name is Marissa, but my name seems to be coming up as Edith, so I'm sorry. Marissa Rivera. I don't know which committee I want to join on just yet.
Okay, you can let us know. And I saw Dr. Mark Mitchell.
Yes, this is Mark Mitchell. I am an associate professor of climate change, health, and environmental, climate change, energy, and environmental health equity at George Mason University. And I lead the health equity subgroup of the public health and safety group of the adaptation group.
Do you want to join the adaptation subcommittee here to, that makes a lot of sense, okay. And Mariam Alahi? Okay, people may still be joining on, so we'll circle back to them. Lee, anything else before we turn it back to James?
Well, as a part of my example, I forgot to mention public engagement is what I will be focusing on.
Okay.
That's it.
Thank you. Okay, James, back to you.
Great. So thank you, Marion and Lee. I have been asked to do a brief presentation updating the group on the GC3's work So I'm going to share my screen. Just bear with me while I get to the PowerPoint. Okay. So I just wanted to include the agenda so you could see what else is going on this evening after my presentation. We'll turn it back over to Lee and Marion to go over some of the draft public guidance documents and talk more about the subcommittees of this working group. And then we have Brenda Watson from the Progress on Mitigation Strategies Working Group, who will give a presentation on their group's work. And we'll have time at the end for public comments as well. So the work status of the GC3, all of the GC3 working groups are continuing to hold meetings remotely via Zoom or via conference call, despite the current pandemic conditions. I think when you saw a shift to telework, there was a slight delay, but things have picked up again very quickly. You could keep track of the upcoming meetings of all of the GC3 working groups at the website below. And again, these slides, as well as the recording, will be posted on the GC3's website, on that website specifically, where you will be able to find them. And the original GC3 timeline is still in effect. So the executive order called for some deliverables due to the governor by January of 2021. We are still planning to meet that timeline. And here's the timeline just for your own benefit. The GC3 held a kickoff meeting back in December. In February, the working groups started to meet. There are 7 working groups, and I'll get into that in a little more detail momentarily. 7 working groups, including this one, that cover a range from some items that are focused specifically on climate change mitigation, to some that are focused on adaptation, to some that are cross-cutting, like this working group, that cover both aspects of climate change. The working groups are expected to meet through August, and at the end of August, they will be presenting their pieces of the final deliverables that will be due to the governor. And starting in September, we will put those recommendations out for public comment, generate some feedback, and then finalize the recommendations based on the comments we received. So as of now, despite the pandemic conditions, this timeline is what we're working off of. Obviously, this situation is very, very fluid, and we are consistently reevaluating, is this the right time frame? Will anything within this time frame need to be adjusted? But as of right now, we seem to have been fairly successful in terms of being able to continue to do some work. I think when it comes to equity and environmental justice, one of our main concerns with the current conditions is we need to make sure we're actually getting out into communities to be able to talk with folks. So that's something that we're consistently going to be evaluating moving forward. So one of the main goals of the chair of the GC3, who is Commissioner Katie Dykes of DEEP, is to ensure that equity is embedded throughout the entire process. And here are some ways in which that is currently being conducted. First of all, each working group has members that were recommended by this working group to ensure that equity concerns in vulnerable communities have a seat at the table in all of the discussions. I think one of the things we recognize is that not every group can be represented at every single working group. So that's why this group is so important, to make sure that we are consistently communicating with all the members from the environmental justice community on other working groups and interacting with the co-chairs of the other working groups. Secondly, Edith Pestana, who is the DEEP staff lead for the Equity and Environmental Justice Working Group, is sending out regular emails to her EEJ email list to alert this group of other upcoming GC3 meetings. So every time a meeting gets put on the calendar, it goes through a public noticing process that gets put on the Secretary of State's website and the DEEP website. Edith is making sure to send out to this whole email list, that list of meetings, so that folks that are interested in equity, that are on the equity working group, can still participate in the other working groups, even if they're not members of other working groups. I think that public participation is key to having success. Also, we've asked each working group to schedule a time to speak with the environmental or equity and environmental justice co-chairs and the broader membership about how they're considering equity and vulnerable communities in their working groups. That is one of the reasons why we have Brenda Watson with us tonight to communicate with us about the work of the Progress on Mitigation Strategies working group. So we're seeing that in action tonight. And lastly, each working group must invite the equity and environmental justice co-chairs to participate in at least one of their meetings to better evaluate how they are considering equity in their work. So by all of these, we're hoping to ensure that there's standardized protocols for ensuring equity is considered. This is by no means exhaustive. So if there are other ideas that you have, or in talking with members of other working groups, you generate some ideas on how to go beyond the points listed here, you're certainly welcome to do that. We want to encourage that. Here, Edith asked me to put together an organizational chart for all of the GC3 working groups. So there are 7 working groups, as you can see, listed out in orange here. Many of those working groups have created subgroups, and that has been somewhat confusing for folks who have a passing knowledge of what the GC3 is and what the operations are consisting of. And even for some of us who are working on the GC3, it's been hard to keep up with all that's going on. So hopefully this graphic will help illuminate some items. Just to point out, some of the working groups have areas that might overlap with others. And I want to point specifically to the Progress on Mitigation Strategies, which is all the way to the left. You can see that there are considerations for buildings, electricity, transportation. Those are 3 of the subgroups that they have broken out into. And if you look at some of the other working groups, for example, adaptation, planning, and implementation, there is also a transportation group there. There's a buildings group there. There's a utility infrastructures group there. So some of these working groups may have areas that are overlapping in overall nature. So when you think about transportation, the Progress on Mitigation Strategies will be covering the emission side, right? So transition to electric vehicles, making public transit more accessible, promoting pedestrian and bicycle usage. That's the area of transportation that group will focus on. When it comes to adaptation, planning, and implementation, the thinking around transportation tends to be more, where are some transportation corridors that are in flood zones? How do we think about adapting to that? We have a huge amount of rail that's along the coastline that are actually in flood zones. What's our plan moving forward to think about that? So there are different aspects of transportation, among other areas when it comes to climate change, that may straddle more than one of these working groups. Hopefully this diagram helps folks get a better sense of who's covering what. And if there are any questions about overlapping areas, I want you to feel free to reach out to myself, to Edith, to Marion and Lee, and we could help facilitate a better understanding of what areas are being covered. But if you have a particular topic area of interest, this graphic should also help you pinpoint which working groups you should be paying attention to and which subgroups you should be paying attention to. So with that, that concludes my my slides and update on the GC3, and I will turn it back over to Marion and Lee. Unless you think I should answer some questions.
Yeah, does anyone, limit it to a couple minutes, but does anyone have a question for James? I just want to add one thing to one of the charts that might also clarify, in addition to the 4 ways equity works across all working groups, a 5th way, and it's reason we are having these subcommittees, is that the recommendations that they are creating will be iterative. So as we'll talk about in the public participation discussion, what we've communicated and what James and Edith have communicated to all the working groups is that we're hoping that our working group can play a role in giving feedback early in the process that they have of making recommendations. So we hope to have subcommittees on mitigation and on adaptation, for example, so that they can have input in an iterative way on those recommendations, not just at the end of the line when the recommendations are more firmly set. So that's a fifth way that we hope equity will be worked in. Does anyone have a question?
I see Mary Pelletier has a question. I'm going to unmute her.
Hi, this is Mary, and I'm wondering, I'm especially concerned about urban rivers and that the issues surrounding urban suburban riparian corridors are evolved through this process, and I'm not finding a kind of clear path. I feel like the rivers groups and some of the other groups are more focused, you know, that they're kind of this you know, standard professionals who have, you know, very clear concerns about rivers, but they're not necessarily urban rivers. And you know, this is an equity issue. How do we, you know, we get these what maybe in the past were marginal concerns to sort of rise in this process, to be taken seriously?
So that's a great question, and I think that's part of what we are discussing tonight, and part of what I laid out in my presentation. I think first of all, you know, that's a comment that we as a working group need to bring back to the Working in Natural Lands working group, in particular the river subgroup. I think also the Adaptation Planning and Implementation working group has a subgroup on land use and buildings that may be more focused on urban issues, and that working group is a little less or not quite as far along as the Working in Natural Lands working group. So I don't know that they've fully scoped out their the entirety of their issue areas. So I think those two working groups in particular are where we need to target. And I would suggest that, you know, as this working group does their outreach to the other working groups, that be a point of interest that we bring up to each of them. And, you know, the idea being that this is this working group's purpose, that we need to be working with the other working groups to make sure that they're considering issues that that are important when it comes to equity and EJ.
And I have one more question, which is, so a lot of the, you know, I've been listening in on a number of these, and, you know, they seem, I mean, everybody's still in the learning phase, and you know, many of the recommendations that kind of coming out are more general, you know, preserve forests or quantities of forests or whatever. But I'm wondering, is there going to be case study locations for solution-oriented steps? You know, not just in urban areas like, you know, New Haven or Hartford, but, you know, whatever the, you know, rural and coastal goals are, because so much of the funding goes to coastal places, and we're not seeing as much of it inland. It would be nice if the G3 groups said that there were real locations and neighborhoods and communities that were going to represent solution-oriented steps.
I think that's a great comment. And I think each working group might approach things differently. One of the challenges is we don't have a lot of time here, so I think the recommendations will be broad, but I want to emphasize, and we'll get into this more later, that one of the areas that this working group will be investigating is the equity mapping tool. So that may help illuminate some of the disparities that you're referencing, Mary. I know that doesn't totally answer your question, but I hope that provides you something to go off of.
Yes, thank you.
Great.
Maybe we should keep going. Thank you, James, and thanks, Mary, for the question. We are moving into the next part of the agenda, which is on the public guidance documents. I hope you've all seen them. Edith Visana sent them out, and they're also available on the website. And maybe I had put them in the chat room or linked them in the chat room, and someone who came early can copy that over and make sure it's available for people who just arrived. First of all, the way in which this will operate is I'm going to try to present the basic material from the documents, and we have 5 topics of conversation. 1 slide each, and we're going to try to spend about 5 minutes with a couple minutes of presentation and a couple minutes of conversation. And obviously that doesn't, in Q&A or discussion, that doesn't do any of this justice. And so given that we only have about 35 minutes on the agenda, we thought that at least it will kick off conversation. All of these documents are up on the website, and there's an email there. Anyone can send comments about these documents. They're just in a very draft stage. And what we'd like is for everybody to engage with them, to think about them, to give feedback. You can definitely let Edith or Lee or me know if you'd like to talk, in addition to sending any comments online. So think of this as just a beginning conversation. And for this half hour, any working group members, let's engage in conversation about that, and then we'll have that time for public comment toward the end of the meeting. And if anyone wants to return to these documents, feel free. I also want to thank, first of all, Leticia Colon de Mejias for her engagement with these documents, and also 3 students at Yale who may be on the phone, Jill Capitosto, Charlie Crosby, and Angie Rao, who did the drafting and put a lot of work into this. Next slide. So this is just by way of background. One of the core objectives of this working group is to provide the GC3 as a whole with clear guidance on public participation and community engagement. And so again, these are draft documents to start the conversation, and then as we get further into the work in the year, we will refine that. That is one of the main goals of having a public participation subcommittee, that they can take these documents, take the feedback we get, try to put them in final form. And of course, all of this is even more challenging because we're now thinking about remote public participation in addition to overall public participation. And I will say, as many of you know, moving for people committed to equity and public participation, moving online is even more of a challenge. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So the goal here today is to review these basics and then solicit feedback, both during discussion and during public comment, and then online. Next slide. The conversation will be in 5 parts. There are 4 principles for public participation and community engagement, and each of these will be a slide, and we'll pause and have some Q&A or discussion, and then move on to the others. We're asking that each of the working groups, even while we're in process and thinking this through, adhere to these principles and ask themselves, is decision-making, the first one, transparency and accountable decision-making, is decision-making across the GC3 open, transparent, and accountable to the public at all stages? So that means not just starting and coming up with a recommendation and then inviting comment, but inviting comment early and often. Is the decision-making process accessible to and inclusive of diverse populations? Are community members equal partners in decision making? Is the decision making process respectful of the time and effort of participants? And now with a pandemic, we have to all consider and make sure we're engaging the community without in-person meetings or conversations. So those are the 5 topics we're going to talk about. We'll land on each for about 5 minutes. So let's dig in. Next slide. Okay, so this is the first topic that we want to make sure we cover. And this is the core idea is transparent and accountable decision making, that the public has the right to be informed of and included early and often in clean, transparent, and reliable decision-making processes. And underneath there, you have 5 of the bullets, 5 key principles that the GC3 needs to adhere to. And we are each working group and the GC3 as a whole needs to have a public participation plan. Using the guidance that were created. And I should mention that even though this is a draft, we have shared this with the co-chairs of each of the working groups so that in an iterative way, they can take this into account and they can be engaging the public along the way. And we let them know these are just drafts and that we'll be sending more final recommendations going forward, but we don't want to have, the train leaving the station, they're doing the work, and then in, later in the year, we tell them, oh, by the way, you should have had transparent and accountable decision making. Anyway, transparent and accountable decision making, developing a plan, providing clear information, clearly and frequently sharing data used to measure progress toward objectives and goals, documenting the public participation plan and analyzing its success and community opinion in public reports, and ensuring that all personnel involved understand the policies to share information with communities in a timely and accessible way. So that's like a checklist of ways to ensure that the GC3 is adhering to the principle of transparent and accountable decision making. With it in mind that this is only one of 5 slides we're going to get to and one of 5 principles, I want to see if there are any questions, comments, gaps that you see on this part of the checklist and the principles. Anyone from the working group, feel free to raise your hand and jump in. Does this seem clear to you? And is this a clear way of promoting or ensuring the GC3 adheres to this? And Lee, you should feel free to jump in as well.
We have a question from Kathy Fay. Kathy, you're on mute.
I guess, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So my question is, I think this is a great checklist, this part of the checklist. My only question is, for the last item, and really basically all of them, how will we know that that has happened?
That's a great question. I'll give a quick starting point, but I think that question suggests that there needs to be accountability, which is part of this whole slide. And one of the bullets here is that each working group should document its plan and analyze the success of implementing the plan in its public report. So we would, if they adhere to that, if they don't adhere to that, we'll know it because there won't be a plan and we won't see the implementation of the plan. If they adhere to it, we'll be able to assess what people did and whether it adhered to their plan. So that's the accountability that is built into this.
So would we want a timeline for that?
Good question. I think, and James can correct me if I'm wrong, I think the working groups are in practice perhaps partly because of COVID, but on different timelines for work. And the commissioner and James have made clear that integrating equity is a top priority across the GC3. So they are tooling and retooling to incorporate these ideas. I don't know, we can pose the question whether there's an across the board timeline or whether they should each have a timeline that they develop based on their work. It's a really great question.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, should we move to the next slide? Again, this is just a preview. Everybody take some time with these documents and comment or send us comments or engage us in conversation. And we will convey all this to the subcommittee on public participation. The second principle here is accessible and inclusive decision making. That every local context has its own cultural, environmental, and social background, and the GC3 needs to work actively to meet people where they are. This includes working with community leaders to create a common language with neutral terminology, free of jargon, sensitive to race, ethnicity, culture, gender, disability status, and language. That documents need to be translated and interpretation needs to be available. And in-person discussions for individuals with limited English proficiency, as well as people with disabilities. And alternative options and assistance for individuals needs to be made available for people who are physically, visually, and or hearing impaired. It's core to, it's baseline for accessibility. That meetings need to be advertised and their proposed agenda needs to be published in a timely manner in popular print and electronic media sources, as well as radio if appropriate. And there needs to be a contact with whom communities can communicate about upcoming meetings. And I will also just convey that the commissioner and James have made clear that agendas need to be up on the website and need to be done in advance, and that message has gone out. Meeting times must be convenient and at multiple locations when we can have in-person meetings again, and that location should be local and accessible, of adequate size, and ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act compliant. And that when we are in person again, that tele or video conferencing options for the public to join must be made available for in-person meetings using technology available to the public. And we realize that there are downsides to meeting remotely, and some people won't be able to meet if they don't have some computer technology or phone technology, but there are also downsides to in-person meetings, and sometimes they can be hard to get to for people with disabilities or for other populations. So we need to make both available. Okay, let me pause and see if people have comments or questions. And again, Lee, I invite you to jump in.
Hi, this is Orlando. I don't know how to raise my hand, so I just started talking. For televideo conferencing options, for the public to join in person, at times people are working. Obviously, we're meeting at 5:30. It seems like it's an accessible time for all of us to meet. What if people cannot? What options are there for them to catch up, if you will? Will there be some sort of repository of meetings for them to be able to, for anybody to be able to review if they cannot make it? Again, everybody's schedule is completely different. So yeah, just considering that.
So translating that into a principle here or in our checklist, that there should be an opportunity for people to participate even if they couldn't make the time of the meeting. Online, that's relatively easy because we have a recording and then it's going to be posted on the DEEP website, so long as we make sure people get that link to the DEEP website and that they can get on. When we go back to in person, it's just as important. We are taking note notes. The GC3 working groups are taking notes and posting them. If we also have a video conferencing option, we can use the record button and put it all up there as well. We are also putting these kinds of documents online, and hopefully the GC3 will the strong recommendation is for the GC3 to do that in general, that as you develop working documents, to put them up online, and then people can comment on them. So both the meetings and the documents should be up there. Is that responsive, Orlando, or do you have any other suggestions?
No, that pretty much covers it. Yeah, no, I mean, as long as it's available to the public for them to view at any given time, that's really more of where I was thinking. But I guess, they should also be looped in and know when those things go up online, if and when they do. But yeah, no, that pretty much gets to it.
Right, I think that goes also to the plan that we talked about at the beginning, because if we don't advertise that material is up there and there are opportunities to engage in a meaningful way, then you can put all the stuff you want on the website, but nobody will go find it. So each of these doesn't work in isolation, but they work together as necessary components of public participation. Thanks for bringing that up. Any other comments or? Yeah, go ahead.
We have a question from Mary Pelletier. I will unmute her.
Hi, again, so I think this is a really admirable goal. I would like to note that there's many people who have, for years, if not decades, participated in planning processes of, maybe the city or their neighborhood, and sometimes the planners listen to them and sometimes they don't. So I think every new planning process is a very hopeful one. But I wonder how, whether you're assuming that individuals are going to come because they find this information on the web, or will you also be reaching out to a wide variety of neighborhood associations or trade groups, or I don't want to say trade groups, but different groups have gathered their own constituency, and is that how you're reaching out to sort of penetrate the lack of participation that happens because the same people go to these things over and over and sometimes get results and sometimes don't?
So I'll give a quick thought, which is, you're absolutely right. Sometimes it's a small group of people that are participating. And then there's, as at our first meeting where we talked about what is equity, and Leticia sort of led us in that conversation, lots of people were saying, look, there's a lack of trust. It's hard to overcome that. There's a lot you need to do to engage people. And I think all that is true. Having a public participation plan that includes how are we going to reach out to people, how are we going to communicate with people is really, really important. And to recognize people come with experiences where they haven't been listened to. And so we just got to keep at it. We got to be listening and really show that this is going to be a meaningful effort. So thank you for the comment. It's really important. And I think we all need to keep wrestling with it and give your suggestions now and online. Yeah.
Marion, this is Lee, if I could just jump in on this for a moment.
Sure.
So I have been working diligently in Greater New Haven to cultivate a social media following, which now numbers about 10,000 people. And I know there are people like me in Hartford, in other parts of the state. And so I would urge everyone on this call to think about who they know that is not a usual suspect, that has that sort of a following. Now, for me, it's a part of my job to do this at the Community Foundation, but I know that there are others like myself. So I plan to be using my network to get the word out, and would encourage others to not only think of their own networks, but think about those social media communicators among other ways, because there are people that are good at doing it in the one-on-one conversation, which is also very important. So those would be my thoughts.
Thanks.
Lee, I guess I'll just also mention to remind people, in addition to comments now, I think I mentioned this, but we wanted to emphasize there is that email address online when you go look at the documents, and you can, encourage people to use the email to get us any additional comments. So we really want the public to weigh in on all this as well. Let's go to the next. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Hi, it's Leticia. I just want to make a comment, because there's a comment in someone's commenting in the comment section that it's a lot of work to ensure that the equity group gets notices of all the other meetings. And I just want to say, having an equitable approach to something is a lot of work, especially when historically we've done everything with a lack of equity. So it is a new process to undertake for the state and for DEEP to take, but they are making the effort to take that step by having chairs of this commission, subcommission, and working hard to create the documents that we're reviewing now. Although having an equitable approach is difficult and it adds to the workload, it is something that we should do above all else, especially as it relates to climate change, but in general. So I do think it's important that although it adds a little bit of work to people's day to send that information out and ensure that everyone has access to it and that everyone knows when the meetings are, that is literally the point of an equitable approach, is to allow people to have access to information, time to read it, and the opportunity to respond and have a voice at the table. And that it isn't just the same group of people that are always doing the planning, which has been happening in our state historically. As someone said earlier, those same groups of people that plan. The point of this is to ensure that it's not just the same people doing the planning, and that other voices do get to the table and are heard prior to the plan being written and formalized completely. And I think that is the intention of this document and this process.
Thanks so much, Leticia. James, do you want to go to the next slide? That's such an important message. Really appreciate that. Of course, good intentions need to be followed up with real action and incorporating this way of doing things in a more systemic basis. Okay, then the third principle here is equal partnerships, co-production, and self-determination. And each of the working groups has to ask itself, are we really asking communities for equal input and creating policies with them rather than for them? Those whose health and environment are most affected by a decision have the right to be meaningfully involved in the decision-making process. It's principle number 7 in the environmental justice principles. It is core, and they have the right to play an equal role in producing ideas and plans, not just reacting to them. Strong relationships built on trust, which takes time to build, but built on trust and mutual respect are key to meaningful participation. So the checklist here is that the GC3 must form meeting agendas with community representatives, must get that feedback, must understand how the community would like information presented and questions they would like answered and languages they speak. Understanding your audience is key. Must create an atmosphere of equal participation at meetings and gatherings by avoiding a head table or panel, and they must provide opportunities, multiple opportunities and channels for the public to voice questions and concerns, so people feel welcome and people feel valued. And we must document questions and concerns and provide clear information about next steps or follow-up, which we're trying to do here, really trying to say this is the beginning of the conversation. These principles will be up online. There'll be a subcommittee that is considering these, and then they will form the basis for further discussion. So really important that we model what we're talking about as well. Any comments or questions about this slide about equal participation, co-production, and self-determination? And James pointed out on the chat that that we are, or DEEP is, sending out weekly notices to the GC3 listserv with lists of upcoming meetings and agendas. There's more on there that you can see on the chat. Any comments?
Just to throw in a quick comment with regards, I mean, I'm thinking specifically create an atmosphere of equal participation at meetings. Is there any way possible that meetings could be co-chaired, for lack of a better term, by community members? You know, so we're not always the ones driving. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think one question is, who is chosen for being a co-chair, and who's on these meetings, and you know, who's on the working groups, and then how does that agenda get set, and you know, how do we make this real? And one mechanism would be to ensure that there's community participation at all levels of meetings and the working group. Having said that, there are community representatives in many of the working groups, and they're playing strong roles in these working groups. And if there are additional community members who are interested in playing more of a role, you know, feel free to let James, Edith, me, or Lee know. Some of this is, you know, moving out of the train leaving the station. Some of the working groups are not as far along, so that's a conversation. But good suggestion. Thanks. Any other comments or suggestions? Okay, let's go to the next slide. These are all interactive. We have 2 more topics, so I want to make sure we get through them. This is obviously overarching. This is the principle of respect, efficiency, and non-exploitation, that we have to ask ourselves whether the decision-making process is respectful and streamlined to ensure that time and the effort of participants is valued, that people have limited social, financial, emotional, and time resources. And this may be especially true of communities burdened with environmental or socioeconomic hardships. Policymakers should respect people's limited time and resources and avoid exploiting their time, knowledge, and energy. Sometimes we think having sort of free-for-all and an open conversation is the best approach to getting input. And that may be true, but it also is the case that if we go on forever, people have children, maybe, you know, at home or babysitting or whatever it is, and we just have to be thoughtful and respectful about people's time. So that includes coordination with other government departments so that community concerns, ideas, and feedback are acted on in a timely and coordinated manner. Establishing a central point of contact with the department to share information, resolve problems, and serve as an accessible advocate of the public's rights. And I will say that on the GC3 website, it identifies who the point of contact at DEEP is for each of the working groups. After a forum or meeting, establish and advertise procedures to follow up with concrete action. Create opportunities for continued participation and feedback after the project has been implemented. For example, over internet updates or Edith's email newsletters, and by updating community leaders so that they can get the word out. And then where possible, work with state agencies to identify resources to hire trainers and staff with technical and administrative knowledge of environmental justice, who are representative of the community, and to train staff in community outreach. And we understand that resources are tight and that it's not always possible to identify those resources, and that there's some limitations to identifying private resources, but work should be done to ensure that there are such resources to engage members of the community and to train staff in community outreach, and that should be a priority. I'll pause on this slide about respect and efficiency and non-exploitation to see if people have comments or thoughts or questions.
We do have one question from Cynthia Jennings. Cynthia, I think you're on mute. I'm trying to unmute you from my end. You could also try at the bottom left of your screen to unmute yourself. It doesn't seem to be working for me.
If it doesn't work, Cynthia, feel free to put your question in the chat and one of us can read it if that works for you. And anyone else, feel free to put your questions in the chat as well.
You can also hold down the space bar to unmute.
I didn't know that.
We still can't hear you, Cynthia.
Sorry. While we're working out the technical glitch, does anyone else have a question?
Am I off mute now?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you.
All right. Okay. What I wanted to do was say that in terms of respecting other people's resources, sometimes the state has resources where they can provide a laptop or something for, for people that are out there that would like to participate but cannot. I mean, it's the same way the schools were, their resources were made available to the students when they had to keep them home. I think we need to really take a look at that and find out whether or not people want to participate, and make sure they clearly understand what participation means relative to climate change and exactly what this group is coming up with and what kind of recommendations they're going to come up with and how they're going to affect people. So I also think that we need to have possibly some community forums at the NRZs where the people are already there or online with, in another system, and actually have people be able to talk and ask questions about what this whole process is and how it would have impact their families, their communities, and why it's important that people become involved.
Thanks. Thank you. Anyone, any other comments or suggestions? That's actually a good segue to our next slide, in part because the plan and our recommendations were so headed in the direction of having community forums and going around the state and engaging people in person, and best practices that are promoted in research and thinking about public participation. And many of the people on the phone who have been steeped in organizing, and Lee can jump in on this, really have been steeped in building relationships and how good engagement is based on relationships. And then COVID hits, and really we took a step back and said, okay, if this distancing is going to last, what's the research, what's the thinking, what's the practice in Connecticut and what are the barriers to remote participation? And so this additional tool and checklist was put together on what are best practices and what must be done to ensure accessibility and all the principles we laid out before in remote public engagement. And to think about this, it's important to think about the 3 categories of engagement. One is soliciting one-way feedback. So that's consulting. So, notice and comment rulemaking or something, you put a document up and you get feedback. And so it comes toward you. A second is deliberation, having a back and forth, a dynamic discussion or meaningful input in decision making. So you don't only get feedback on a document, but engage in conversation that affects the way you think about things. And then the third is informing, broadcasting one-way communication to the public. You say, gee, we have this information up, or gee, this is happening. And so there are different kinds of engagement. And the reason that's important to think about is in creating a plan and thinking about what tools to use. Different tools for remote engagement work differently and provide different opportunities. Some are like radio announcements, get the word out. Some allow the public to go back and forth. You know, if you put comments in a place and there's a running list, they can be iterative and people can talk to each other, and some are just one way. So the steps here are to select tools for remote public engagement by setting your goals, figuring out what you're trying to do, evaluating capacity, and then creating a plan that will allow you to figure out, oh, this is what I'm trying to do. These are the tools that I need. And in the document that we shared, it actually also has a chart saying what kinds of tools are useful for what kinds of public engagement. And then if you have a plan, steps for implementing remote engagement, to be more detailed in your planning, to develop your communication strategy, to get the word out about how people can engage, set the ground rules. Sometimes that's something simple as whether to use mute or whether to have video on or whatever it is, setting clear expectations, and then soliciting and respond to feedback. And then, of course, ensuring the accessibility of any form of remote engagement, accessibility in all the ways that we talked about before, for the various populations of people that we need to reach. So that's the overview of remote public participation. Various tools to facilitate each of these might include social networking sites, online surveys, public meeting software, informational videos, and many others. I'll pause, and again, this is all information we want your feedback on, and we also want to make sure that all of the GC3, not just the equity working group, all of the GC3 is using best practices and engaging the public. Thoughts, comments? How are we on time? Questions? There seems to be a, yeah, go ahead, Lee.
Marion, I just wanted to jump in to say, I did send a little link that I'll correct about just a 1-minute video for people who are not familiar with Zoom that you can just send to them that explains exactly how to engage in Zoom as a participant, not as a meeting leader. So I'll correct that in a moment. But I just wanted to emphasize 2 things. One is, in the chat, we've also put the email address that was mentioned before for sending information to us, gc3eej@gmail.com. Again, gc3eej@gmail.com. And then the second thing is, now is the time to cash in, as they say, on those relationships that you have built. Think about the people that you know that are not involved in this work, but you've built a relationship with them through your place of employment, through your union, through your church, synagogue, or mosque, through whatever relationship you have, your reading group. Those people that you have relationship with, those are the people that you have the best chance of engaging in getting concrete feedback to specific things that you think might interest them. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. So we are going to turn this over now with that reminder that this was the beginning and we want your input. With that reminder, we're going to turn it over to Brenda Watson, who kindly agreed to make a presentation about the Progress on Mitigation Working Group and how they're thinking about integrating equity. And then after that presentation, we will open the meeting up for public comments. Brenda?
Thank you, Marian. James, if you wanted to open up my slides, that's fine. You don't have to. I can just talk us through it. Okay, I'll go ahead and get
You're
started.
talking about puzzle piece organizing?
So,
Sorry, I'm having some difficulties. I'll pull it up momentarily, but you can get going.
okay, I'll get started. I'm one of the 3 co-chairs on the Progress on Mitigation Strategies work group. I just want to note that the environmental equity piece has been ongoing since early March when we began meeting. And in the midst of COVID-19, I don't think that we can ignore that COVID has exposed many of our systems weaknesses as it relates to housing, education, health, transportation, and employment, and that it also serves as a reminder of how Black Americans, people of color, and poor people are disproportionately impacted by natural and human disasters, making our efforts in this work just more important to ensure that we pay close attention and care to the environmental equity piece. I also want to note that access to technology and internet have been critical during the shutdown, that without it, children couldn't continue their education, parents or working adults couldn't continue to work remotely, and that early estimates have noted that there's a 5% drop in carbon emissions. So where technology and broadband may not be directly tied to this work, I believe that those are pieces that we can't ignore, and that this is an opportunity for us to make note of that and highlight how important it is to ensure that there's equitable access to broadband. What we've also discovered in this process is that some of the recommendations regarding environmental equity and environmental justice are not across the board issues in terms of regional or town and city needs. Some recommendations may need to be codified based on the uniqueness of town or city. Example of that would be transportation issues in Brooklyn or in Willimantic will not be the same as they are in New Haven or Hartford. So looking through these lenses, the Progress on Mitigation Strategies work group have begun to generate the following environmental equity concerns. Next slide, please. So our process so far, I just want to quickly summarize what that looks like. We have begun relying heavily on the environmental justice group to hold accountable and help us identify some blind spots. Me personally, as a Black multi-ethnic woman, I am removed from issues that impact people living with disabilities, folks that are hearing and vision impaired, and people who 100% rely on public transportation, and et cetera. So we're continuing to grow our stakeholder list and work with folks like Dr. Mark Mitchell, Leticia Colon, and folks from the disability community to ensure that we're covering all points. Using a shared spreadsheet,
What happened now? I'm mute. Now I'm definitely mute.
Did we just lose Brenda?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did.
I think we did lose Brenda.
Hopefully she'll come back in a minute.
Hi, I'm back. Was I knocked off?
Yep.
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, but we
But
can hear you
we're
now.
glad you're back.
Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes, can you hear us? We're glad you're back. Oh, it sounds like her connection is well.
Freeze. Freeze.
I'm back. Okay. Sorry about that. I just got knocked off. Should I start over on the process? I'm not sure how long I was knocked off.
I think we last heard you talk about how you're building your stakeholder list and working with members of the disability community.
Can
as
you
well
all hear
as-
me?
Yes.
And you just started talking about the spreadsheets.
I'm not sure she can hear us.
Okay, I apologize. I might be having some Wi-Fi issues.
It might be helpful if you turn off your video so that all of your bandwidth goes to your voice.
Is that better?
That's good.
Okay, great.
Sounds good.
All right, so I'll go ahead and okay. I apologize for that. See, that's technology there. Need to ramp up our Wi-Fi here. So there are 5 subgroups within the mitigation work group. Each group is using a spreadsheet in Google Docs, allowing for real-time edits. The columns include recommendation from the 2018 report, the greenhouse gas impact, investment needed, equity considerations, building on the 2018 progress/status, target, and equity considerations again. And the reason why that column is there twice is because in my years of doing this work with folks, I've noticed that the environmental equity piece is always at the last. Whether I'm on a panel, it's always the last panel. What can you all hear me? I feel like some folks are frozen. Okay.
Yes.
Make sure I'm not
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So in a number of conferences and even some of the books that I've read around environmental, you know, it's always at the end. So I wanted folks in the subgroups to have that equity, environmental justice column closer to the left of the spreadsheets so that you think about it more often and you think about it before you get to the end of what the impacts will be. Just want to make sure that I'm sticking with my notes here. The initial recommendations are appearing to be similar across the work groups, but yes, I'm still on the same equity process slide, James. What we're finding is that there are similar environmental equity recommendations that are similar across the work groups, but I also believe that the solutions, again, are not across the board for all. I mentioned the transportation issue and that we need to ensure that we are exercising our equity muscles so that we consider how these recommendations are going to impact folks in different communities and work through how to address that along with support and feedback, again, from the EEJ work group, the Equity Environmental Justice work group, and that we maintain constant contact with the group throughout this process. And as we continue, we will submit one report to the Equity and Environmental Justice work group. Next slide, James. So I see this as planting environmental equity roots. I was happy to hear that there are a number of folks who agree that we should have a mapping piece to work. We're recommending an environmental equity index that's modeled after the California EnviroScreen. It's a web-based mapping tool used to prioritize energy efficiency funds. So modeling this index in our state, I believe it will be the first comprehensive index ever. We're recommending the development of this as a zoomed out approach to equity and environmental planning. So this would be a web-based mapping tool used to prioritize environmental justice planning, policy, and ranking or arranging of investment. This tool would also include climate change analytics to modeling potential risks to communities and businesses to help create a strategy for mitigation risk and enhancing resilience and response when disasters strike. Because I think we're at a stage now where we need to always anticipate the worst, and that it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So I plan on organizing a presentation of the California EnviroScreen for a demonstration on how that project came to be, as it is in its third iteration now. So there's an opportunity for us here in Connecticut to learn from California and how they developed this index and how they enhanced it over time. Again, another recommendation out of the transportation work group is to, of course, reduce emissions in low and moderate income, expand access to transit and other alternatives to private cars, and to expand low and moderate access to electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, to develop an environmental equity jobs and education pipeline. And I just listed a number of nonprofit groups in the greater Hartford area that I thought of that would be great funnels for a job and education pipeline. But I'm pretty sure that there are many others across the state that could also fit under these recommendations. Next slide, James. So this is the last slide regarding what we've developed so far and what we've collected so far in the mitigation work group is an energy affordability policy to limit energy costs for low-income customers to no more than 6% of their annual household income. So I mentioned COVID earlier, and that it's not only a public health crisis, that it's an equity emergency. The energy affordability gap continues to widen, and the number of households experiencing energy affordability issues continues to grow year after year. This is not a statewide phenomenon. In fact, 30% of the US population struggle with the cost of home energy, including water utilities. In 2017, Operation Fuel funded a study called the Home Energy Affordability Gap. The statewide gap in 2017 was $450 million, impacting nearly 400,000 households in Connecticut. So the energy affordability gap represents the dollar difference between actual home energy bills and affordable home energy bills. So addressing the energy affordability gap in this way is a holistic approach to reforming Connecticut's energy vision to fight climate change. Energy efficiency investments must be delivered to LMI households across our state, as energy relief to customers is just one of many ways to ease the energy burden. So first, we need to prioritize energy efficiency funds for low and moderate income households. I know that that's easier said than done, but with the implementation of the Environmental Equity Index, we may have the ability to model and or visually see the impact on not prioritizing these funds in the long term. Access to renewables via community choice aggregation shared clean facilities, and or ramping up heat pump installs, or the most energy efficient technology available is another way to bring down that energy burden. Note what's happening right now in our subgroups is there's heavy disagreement on how these recommendations work based on community needs. Opinions vary. And so there's more to come on where we land on these as solutions. Finally, direct bill assistance. That will be a permanent need for many living on fixed incomes. So we must continue to support programs funded by the federal government to the tune of about $75 million per year. We should continue to be, actually, we should be working with DSS to leverage these funds to help us achieve our carbon reduction goals. You know, I know that this is a very energy-centered focus work that we're doing, but there are folks that we're trying to help who are
Brenda, are you still there? Brenda? We may have lost her again. Brenda? Are there others still on the line?
Yes.
Still here. Still here.
Okay, good.
Yep, still here.
James, how many more slides were in the deck? Is Brenda almost at the end? Ah, okay.
Yep, that was it. I'm back.
The
I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's going on, but I just wanted to note finally that I would really like to see us work with DSS. What's happening, especially now during COVID, is that folks who would normally seek an appointment in person to get assistance are unable to do that now. So we really need to ramp up our technology in terms of how we serve people with programs and benefits that help them, you know, get through the month. So if we can streamline the application process and make it web-based, where folks could apply for assistance for as long as they have reliable Wi-Fi and but that could actually help with our carbon reduction goals as well, because that means folks are not relying on transportation to get to appointments, and it's less stress for folks who you know, have other issues in which they're homebound or other things like that. So I'll end it there, and I'll take any questions from folks who might have some questions about our preliminary recommendations regarding environmental equity and justice.
Let me make this suggestion, Brenda, if it's okay with you. Thank you, first of all, for that. That was really helpful. And I know on from the chat room, there's a lot of excitement about the ideas on this last slide and about your presentation. We are running behind, and we need to spend a few minutes on in the public comments section of this agenda. Perhaps we could open this up to public comments, and if people have questions for or ideas for Brenda Watson, you can make those in the context of public comment. So we'll open this up to anyone who has a comment either about the presentation we just heard or about anything you heard today or want to hear. I know we're at end. We are committed to 20 minutes. I know James and I and Lee, I don't know about you, but we're able to go over 20 minutes. If people have to drop off, we understand that. Lee, are you able to stay on?
I am able to stay for 20, yes.
Okay, so let's let's open this up. Please raise your hand virtually if you can, and we will go for another 20 minutes through public comments. Alex.
Hi, I just wanted to thank Brenda for her presentation. I have acquaintances who have problems with asbestos in their homes, and they're having disagreements with the landlords on you know, they've gotten the auditing done, but they won't commit to the insulation part. They won't, because they have to remove the asbestos. What is the mitigation committee's plan to tackling hazardous obstacles within people's homes, because energy efficiency is really important. Is Brenda there? I see John and Charles also helped with that presentation. Is there any comments that you have?
Hi, Alex. Can you all hear me? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Most of your question got lost in the Wi-Fi sphere, so I'll try my best to answer. We are still in the process of collecting recommendations, and right now they're just words on paper, and folks are hashing it out in terms of, again, there are regional issues that impact, you know, one part of the state, or landlords versus tenants. So we haven't gotten to the point of where we have landed on any specific solutions. So we're still just trying to figure out how we can get to agreement on these issues based on all of the issues and concerns coming from different folks.
Thank you. I saw some real hands go up. I didn't see them in the chat room. Is there anyone who wanted to jump in? Mark?
Yes, I had a couple of questions about sort of moving forward, and I think that I'm assuming that you're going to have a section about moving forward from here. But there was just some really good comments in the chat box, and I just wanted to make sure that you're going to save those, maybe copy and paste those or whatever else, so that we can get those in addition to setting up times for the groups to meet.
Yeah, so
yes,
follow
Mark,
up. Oh, James, do you want to go?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Mark, that we will be saving the chat for future reference. So any questions, and you know, frankly, there were a lot of resources that were posted as well. We'll have those to refer to and to answer as we move forward.
And I would just add, in addition to saving the chat, having the recording and posting the recording online, getting the online comments on the public participation document, and forming the other thing we'll be doing is forming the subcommittee. So those are all next steps. Thanks. Other comments? Oh, go ahead, Laura Kahn.
Hi, I have a similar question to Alex's, but about toxins from things like lawn chemicals and leaf blowers and other lawn equipment. And I'm hoping the mitigation subcommittee is going to add that to its list. Thanks.
We'll take note of that. Thank you for that. And again, still in the preliminary phase, and wanting to wade through the disagreements on both sides, because I'm gonna just be honest, there are conflicting conflicting opinions in the mitigation subgroups, and we want to do what's best for the people of Connecticut, people that are struggling the most anyway.
Brenda, I just want to thank you for the presentation. I think it was excellent and I really appreciate it. As someone who's working on the equity committee and then fortunately was just able to join the work that you're doing, I do think it is very critical, and I haven't been honored to participate in your group meetings yet, that there be a real focus on kind of what both Marion and you and Lee have really laid out, is that it's not just about mitigating the problem, it's about how to help the people who are going to hurt the most, who are hurting the most, and ensuring that there's an equitable approach to the problem solution, you know, that we're working on. I think that, and I brought this up in another meeting just recently, that not everybody who's on this webinar or on any committee for GC3 has had the opportunity to participate and understand the presentation on the concepts of equity. And we did put a lot of work into that on our subcommittee to kind of define things that people don't generally think of unless they're from that population. So oftentimes people making decisions are not the ones living in areas of disparity, quite often, actually almost always often. And so they don't think about the problems like, if you don't have electricity, you can't take a hot shower, you can't keep your food cold, you can't make a warm meal. And they don't think about things like, you know, if you live in public housing, you do not have access to solar. If you don't own your home, you cannot get solar put on in Connecticut because there literally is not a program for that. Or if you have a barrier like asbestos, mold, vermiculite, high CO, a gas leak, knob and tube to weatherization or upgrades in your home that would both draw down your demand and draw down carbon emissions and draw down indoor air pollutants and help human health. Those people are not thinking of that if they live in an area which is an affluent area that doesn't have those problems. They're more worried about things like bears, parks, open spaces. And so it's very critical, in my opinion, as someone who's a commissioner for the state of Connecticut on equity and opportunity, that there be some ground truthing for all of these subcommissions and anybody who wants to participate and give an opinion on the general concepts of disparities in our own state as they relate to these specific issues that we're trying to address. I bring it up again here, and I'll keep saying it every day, despite people maybe being upset about it, that until people have an understanding of disparities, it is hard for them to understand how to approach those disparities. And the only way I can think of addressing that, you know, and I have been really thinking about it, is to ground truth for those people who have not yet experienced those things and help them understand the real issues. And Brenda did a good job a little bit of talking about the 400,000 households that cannot afford electricity and heat, which I think is critical, you know. I feel like you should be able to see your food and keep it safe at the same time. And I think hot water is another necessity. Like, look at COVID, washing your hands and taking a shower is kind of a thing that people need to do. Water is on the rise, and as climate change happens and water evaporates more rapidly, it's going to be a problem. So I don't know how to address that problem, and I've been, you know, beating myself up about it. And the only way that I've found to do it is just to kind of make these kind of comments on the webinars, try to be on every call and make the comment consistently. But I wonder if there isn't somebody in the audience that has a better idea of how to address my specific concern with helping others who have not experienced disparity understand what is so important, like access to the very basic things like air, water, food, shelter, jobs, education, those very basic things, power.
Thanks, Leticia.
I believe that, so in recommending the environmental equity index, that would be an opportunity for us to kind of look at things in a zoomed out approach. And that by taking each individual recommendation and considering what the environmental equity impact is on each recommendation is our zoomed in approach. And I don't expect for everyone who's doing this work to understand the issues that impact environmental justice defined communities. That's our job. It's our job to relay that to folks who may not be aware. That's one. Number two, I think that if we're going to increase participation from folks who are from these environmentally distressed communities, we're going to have to simply pay them, provide them with a stipend, because the economy is in a trash right now. And for anyone to be worried about anything outside of being able to pay the bills, pay the rent, buy groceries, we cannot expect for folks who are having to take the bus with 20 other people and unable to social distance, go to a job where there's maybe, again, lack of opportunity to social distance. You know, we're not going to be able to expect those folks to be engaged in something that does not feel real to them in the moment. So I think it's our responsibility as folks who understand the impact, who do this work every day, who get paid for it, some of us get paid for it, to be those voices and represent what folks are experiencing. And again, not to necessarily expect for everybody who's involved in this work to understand or know the impact without us being there in the room and telling them and educating them. So I hope that that answers that concern.
I see we have a comment or question from Denise Savageau. Denise, I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you, James. Actually, Brenda may have answered my question, because I was asking about a rubrics, which she's talking about a matrix, and I'm wondering if that is completed and how soon it will go to the work groups, because I think having what you laid out in terms of specific recommendations on equity is really important, but I also think that every single recommendation we do needs to be done with an equity lens, so that we don't have some of the disparities. So for, you know, and a great example of that is when the state was selecting where we were going to put various large-scale solar installations, and by doing one simple thing, saying we have to do it in the place where it is the cheapest to do it, it eliminated basically all of our cities. So they basically took the cities out of being able to, you know, be part of that environmental action that would have really, you know, reduced, would have put electricity where we need it the most in the cities, and also reduce some of the pollution with the generation there. So, so I'm looking at how we do that. So Brenda, if you could just quickly say if the matrix is complete, because I serve on one of the committees on the Working in Natural Lands, and would certainly love to start to have that matrix so that we could start evaluating our recommendations as we move forward. And even look at the plans that were done before and say, okay, do we keep that recommendation? Well, maybe we need to modify it because of the equity lens. Thank you.
Brenda, do you want to respond to that? We may have lost Brenda again, but it was a really good point. And I would just say there were two pieces that Brenda was talking about. One was sort of the spreadsheet or matrix that they're using that integrates an equity considerations along the way, and the other was the mapping tool. I just want to give a shout out to Edith Pestana and some of my students who are on this call who have been scoping a mapping tool that integrates really well into this conversation. They will come out with a report for DEEP on what work has already been done in the state. As Dr. Mitchell knows, there's a lot of back work by private and public sector groups. There are pieces that are already there, and then there are some next steps in developing the kind of index that's used in Cal EnviroScreen and in Washington State and in other places. So there's some exciting kind of synergies going on here. And the progress for mitigation, adaptation, and our working group are all sort of coalescing around the importance of having a visual representation of vulnerability so that we can do planning and decision making, which I think will be helpful throughout this process. Other comments? I think, is there?
Kirsten had a comment.
Hi, my name is Kirsten. So I've been thinking about sea level rise, and I apologize if the adaptation group has already addressed this, but one of the things I think about in terms of equity is when the sea level rises for the shore enough that it displaces huge numbers of people, what kind of plans do we have in place for where they will be resettled in Connecticut? Middletown, when I do my sea level rise mapping on the tools, I see Middletown under. Those are the kinds of things I think about. Is there a resettlement plan, and how equitable will it be? Where will those people go? Thank you.
Folks who are on the adaptation working group, is that within the scope of the discussion, or does it need to be? Mark?
So, yeah, this is Mark. I'm not on that subcommittee of the adaptation working group, but, you know, an environmental justice principle is that people be allowed to return to their previous location. What happens is that, you know, some people will want to return, some people won't, and some people will have the ability to return, and some people won't. And so that's a general, so, you know, if you are, you know, if you own a home and you're flooded out, you know, then you can't sell your home, and you can't sell the property that you have. You have no property. That's what's obviously happened after Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. So, you know, so there are some discussions, some larger discussions about the principles and what should occur around that. Issue.
Well,
Yes.
I guess I think about it from the standpoint that like huge amounts of Middletown shore will be underwater permanently, and there are people who may have had like their emergency fund saved up to be able to resettle. But what plan do we have in place that it equitable resettlement, I guess, is what I'm getting at, assuming that you can't go back to any of those places. Thank you.
Yeah, Kirsten, this is Denise Savageau. I did serve on the adaptation plan before, and I'm now on the wetlands working group and kind of helping with the adaptation plan. And it is certainly a great question. I've actually been down as part of my work on a national level and saw all the damage in New Orleans and Mississippi and Biloxi and whatever. And it's definitely something we need to look at. Mark makes a great comments in terms of love to get people to resettle back. And that's basically because one of the things that happens is gentrification of a neighborhood basically overnight because of a storm event. Sea level rise is a different thing though, because this isn't about that, like you said, you're not going to be able to come back. So one of the things I'm looking at is making, if the sea is reclaiming an area or making an area so vulnerable that we really shouldn't settle there, what we shouldn't allow is folks who can afford to elevate their homes and whatever, or buy out someone who can't afford to elevate their home, basically not to allow the gentrification, but basically reclaim that as floodplain, open space that would be accessible to everybody. So that's what we're looking at. And actually that's happening in West Haven. A USDA, NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, has a program where they're actually buying people's homes out, not at post-Sandy, but pre-Sandy values. So before they were destroyed, they're buying them out in the West Haven neighborhood. And these are mostly low or middle income folks. And buying out their homes, getting them resettled, and that area is not being now developed, it's now going to be a public park that's accessible to everybody. And I think we need to be thinking about those solutions, because one of the worst things we can do
That's beautiful.
is
Yep.
put people in a worse situation. Elevating folks who don't have access to being able to get out of harm's way during a storm event doesn't help you. So there's a lot of issues there. I'm actually did a lot of work on this, and so I'm going to be writing up some comments on that because it's a really, really great question.
Okay, can I ask still one follow-on? And I thank you for that. That is music to hear. The other one I was looking at is the sludge processing plant in Hartford, and I was thinking about flooding in big billion-dollar storms coming our way and all that. And I was thinking, how are we thinking of that once that sludge joins the streets, and how we're going, from a health perspective of every person living in those areas at harm along the Connecticut River, where that sludge enters. Are we thinking about that in a bigger way, that people who don't have insurance, the people who are, less able to cope with a threat like that, health-wise, which is a lot of Hartford has people who are already vulnerable in a 10 to 15 to 20 year life expectancy gap. When you add that in, like just toxins like that may join us, how are we thinking about dealing with those from a health standpoint? That's it. I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Just to let you know that there is a whole committee looking at infrastructure and the idea of moving all of those facilities out of where they are, because they're in floodplains and it's just going to get worse. But that's something they are looking at.
Great, thanks.
Are they, this is Lynn, are they also, can you hear me? Are they also thinking of transitioning to, instead of incinerating sludge, to using anaerobic digestion as an energy source in the infrastructure group?
I think that's probably my understanding, and James, maybe you know, I think that's in the crossover group, where they're looking at the biodigesters and whatever, but it's certainly one of the things that should be being talked about. I know that they were talking about it a little bit in the crossover group, so we'll have to see which group handles that the most. But there's definitely some things they're looking at there, because there's the whole energy piece, and then there's the crossover group that's looking at different things.
So what's the crossover group?
So within the mitigation group, there's a crossover group that's looking at issues that are about adaptation. So for example, moving infrastructure, like let's say a wastewater treatment plant out of the floodplain, that's adaptation. But if it also has energy implications, then it's about, from a mitigation perspective, then it has, so let's say by moving it, you're not only getting it out of the floodplain, but there's something you could do to improve it so it doesn't have as much energy use or is more energy efficient or whatever. So that's the crossover group, looking at those things that are both adaptation and resiliency, and the stuff that's has to do with mitigation.
Great, thank you.
Okay, folks, this is Lee Cruz, one of your co-chairs. We're gonna wrap this up because of the time, and encourage people to continue to be in conversation with each other. We can help you connect with someone if you don't have a specific email address. And James, I don't know if there's anything we need to do in closing other than just say thank you, everybody, for coming in, for your participation at every level. Continue to reach out to the people and help us to keep growing this work. James or Marion?
Thanks, Lee. I don't have anything much more to add, other than I just in the chat put the GC3 EEJ email address, so that if any folks who had more comments and were unable to do so here due to the time, please feel free to email that email address. We understand that there's a lot more to talk about, and it's not possible to get to everything in an hour and a half time frame, and we went over that tonight. So please send those comments in. Keep an eye out for Edith's emails coming up about upcoming GC3 working group meetings as a whole. And again, all of the slides from tonight's meeting, as well as the recording of tonight's meeting, will be posted online within the next few days. So please keep an eye out for those as well. And
I'll
thanks
just add a
everybody
big
for,
thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're thinking along the same lines, James. So thanks everyone for a really good and rich discussion. And thanks to James and Edith for all the work they've put in, and to Lee. Really, it's nerve-wracking to go online with this kind of conversation, and we really appreciate your being part of this big experiment with us to try to engage one another in a meaningful way online. So thank you.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Edith. Thank you, Marianne. And to all, a good night.
Good night.
Good night.